This is the 8th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Who Am I? And as I'll explain later, this is the original version as it was written by Bhagavan. Later, an extra 3 sentences were interpolated, were added to it, but they don't actually fit in very well with the meaning of, with the general meaning that Bhagavan is, the level at which Bhagavan is talking here. So I will deal with them separately at the end. Bhagavan begins this paragraph with a sentence which echoes what he said in the first sentence of the 6th paragraph. So I'll just go back to that sentence just to show the connection. He began the 6th paragraph by saying, Nāṉ Ār ennum vicharane inaleye manam adangam. That means only by the investigation, who am I, will the mind adangam. Adangu is a verb that means to cease, settle, subside, yield, be subdued, be still, or disappear. So it can refer to the to temporary disappearance of the mind, as in sleep, or it can refer to the permanent subsidence of the mind, what is called manonasa. In this context, Bhagavan is referring to the permanent subsidence, because obviously by other means, when we get tired, the mind ceases in sleep. So it's not the only means to make the mind subside temporarily, but it's the only means to make the mind subside or cease permanently. So that's what he says in that paragraph. It's only by the investigation, who am I? And he puts a very strong emphasis on only by the investigation. Inal, vicharane inal means by vichara, by investigation. Vicharane inal ye, the ye emphasizes it. The double ye puts a very strong emphasis on it. So he's very emphatically saying that is the only means by which the mind will cease or subside. Here it means, obviously in this context, it means permanent subsidence. So he begins the 8th paragraph saying much the same thing, but in a slightly, the same import, but in slightly different words. The first sentence he says, Manam adangavadaku vicharanaye tavira veru tahunta upayangalille. That means for the mind to cease, settle, subside, yield, whatever, disappear, be subdued, be still, except vicharana. Vicharana is another form of the Sanskrit word vichara, which means investigation, in this context self-investigation. So except self-investigation, there's no other adequate means. That is, there are other means to make the mind subside temporarily, but to make it subside permanently, to make it cease for once and for all, there's no other adequate means. So that means the only means that will actually put an end to the mind once and for all is vichara. In the next sentence he says, Matro payangalinal adanginal manam adanginal pol irundu marapadium kilambi vidum. That means if the mind is made to subside, to cease or subside by other means, remaining subsided for a while, or remaining as if it was subsided, adangi pol, as if it was subsided, as if it had ceased, it will again rise up. That is, all other the cessation of the mind brought about by any means other than self-investigation is temporary. It will remain in a state of cessation for a short while, and then it will rise up again. We see this every night we go to sleep because we're tired. We don't have energy to continue thinking, projecting all this world and experiencing all these things. We subside back into sleep. That the mind completely ceases in sleep. But sleep is like a state of recharging batteries, because where the mind goes in sleep, it merges back into its source, which is our real nature, which is the source of all power. So the mind recuperates its power in sleep, and it jumps out again. There are also other means to make the mind cease. If we take an anesthetic, for example, if we're having a major operation, we're given full anesthesia, that makes the mind cease for a while. There are also yoga practices. There are so many means. But these are all temporary. Though it remains as if it had ceased, it comes back again. That's the second sentence. In the third sentence, he says, pranayama talum manum adangam. So that means even by pranayama, which is breath restraint, the mind will cease, subside, or disappear. But that's obviously not a permanent cessation. That's the implication here. And that he says that explicitly in the next sentence. Anal pranan adangi irukum varayil manumum adangi irundu. Pranan velipadum podu, tanum velipadum vasane vayatal alayum. That means, however, so long as the prana remains subsided, prana means, it actually means life. And it's manifested through breathing, through all the physiological processes, the heart beating and everything. We can't control all the physiological processes, but one physiological process that we can restrain is the breathing. So that's why in yoga they use pranayama as a means to bring about a temporary cessation of the mind. It can be used just to calm the mind, so the mind is less agitated, or it can be, if you go far enough in pranayama, you can actually bring about the complete cessation of the mind, but that's what's called nirvikalpa samadhi. So that's only a temporary state, it's just like sleep. People in yoga, they make a lot of this samadhi states. But actually, samadhi is that type of samadhi, that nirvikalpa samadhi, is in effect no different to sleep, because the mind has ceased in that state. We can't make any effort to go further. That's why Bhagavan used to say, for people who are practicing pranayama, practice it to a certain extent to calm the mind, but don't go so far as to let it subside in manolaya, in state of temporary subsidence, like nirvikalpa samadhi, because you can't make any progress. And Bhagavan used to tell a story about a yogi who was practicing yoga on the banks of the Ganga, and he had gained such proficiency, he was able to go into nirvikalpa samadhi for increasingly long periods of time. And once when he woke up, he was feeling thirsty, so he asked his disciple to go to the Ganga and get him a cup of water. But before the disciple came back, he again went back into nirvikalpa samadhi, and that time he remained in that state of nirvikalpa samadhi for 300 years. When he woke up, by that time the Ganga had changed course and his disciple had passed away long ago. But the first thing the yogi said, rather angrily, "Where's my water?" That Bhagavan used to say, that illustrates even the last thought that he had when he went into samadhi was the first thought he went when he came out again. So not even the most superficial thought is eradicated by, just like in sleep. We don't get rid of our vasanas when we sleep. Exactly the same in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So even if we remain 300 or 3,000 years in such a state, we're not actually, it's actually of no use. It's like if you're traveling on a train suppose you want to travel from here to Edinburgh, and the train stops in Newcastle, whether it stops 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 100 years, it makes no difference. We're not getting any closer to Edinburgh. So on the spiritual path, it's only the mind that can eradicate its own vasanas. So in a state where the mind is temporarily ceased, no progress can be made. And Bhagavan said, not only did that thought of the water, that even that superficial thought didn't get eradicated, all the passions behind that also didn't get eradicated. That's why he was angry. Where's my water? So it's all these yogic samadhis, Bhagavan said, these are of no use. We need to, our sole aim should be eradicating the mind permanently. That we can achieve only by vichara, by self-investigation. Sorry, that was a bit of a diversion, but it's emphasizing what Bhagavan is saying here. And Bhagavan often used to tell this story to illustrate what he used to say about pranayama and all these yogic practices and the samadhis that result there from that. So he said, however, so long as prana, that's the life manifest in the breathing, so long as that remains subsided or remains in a state of cessation, the mind will also remain in a state of subsidence or cessation. In other words, a state of manalaya. But when the prana emerges, it, meaning the mind, will also emerge and wander under the sway of its vasanas. That is, when the mind rises in waking and dream, it's wandering here and there, thinking so many thoughts. All these is what Bhagavan describes as wandering under the, or wandering, alayam means like a wave, moving around, wavering, wandering, roaming about, under the sway of its vasanas. The word he used in Tamil for sway is Vayam. Vayam is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word vasam, which means under the sway, under the control, under the dominion of its vasanas. That is, the vasanas are propensities, inclinations, impulses, desires to experience all these things. This is what is pulling our mind outwards. But as he explains in a later paragraph, it is possible for us to destroy these vasanas, but if we are not trying to turn within, if we're not trying to, well, either turn within or surrender ourselves, we are just wandering around under the sway of our vasanas. This is what our normal condition throughout waking and dream. Then, so that in these first four sentences, he's explained the cessation of mind that's brought about by any other means, such as pranayama, is only temporary, when the mind will remain as if it had ceased for a while and it comes out again. Then from the fifth sentence onwards, he begins to explain this. Manatikum prananukum pirupidum andre. That means the birthplace both for mind and for prana is one. Birthplace means the source, the place from which it originated. That the place from which it originates is our own real nature. When the mind and prana subside in sleep, where are we then? We are in our real nature. Our real nature is what Bhagavan often refers to, particularly in Nāṉ Ār, as Atma-vichara. Atma-vichara means the real nature of oneself. And as he explained in the beginning, in answer to the very first question asked by Shiv Prakashan Pillai, who asked, who am I? Bhagavan said, Arive Nāṉ. Arive Nāṉ means awareness alone is I. So our real nature is only awareness, but not awareness of all these things, pure awareness. The awareness that we experience in sleep when there are no phenomena. That awareness is here even now, but it's seemingly concealed by our awareness of phenomena. Awareness of phenomena is not our real nature. Our real nature is just pure awareness. And that Bhagavan describes as the Pirapidam, the birthplace of the mind. Because it's from that the mind and all these phenomena appear, and into that which they disappear. So the birthplace for both mind and for prana is one. Nineve manatin sarupam. Thought alone is the swarupa of the mind. Swarupa literally means own form, but it means the actual nature of the mind. The mind is nothing but thoughts, as Bhagavan often said. But though the mind consists of innumerable thoughts, as he says in the next sentence, Nānenam nineve manatin mudal ninevu. The thought called I alone is the first thought of the mind. When he says it's the first thought, he says elsewhere, but when but this thought called I is the ego. So as he often says, when the ego comes into existence, everything else comes into existence. So it's the appearance of the ego and all these phenomena are simultaneous. As soon as we wake up from sleep, whether in this state we take to be waking or in a dream, we immediately are aware of ourselves as a body, and we're aware of an external world. All these arise simultaneously. But Bhagavan says, this thought called I is the first thought. It's the first thought in the sense, not that it comes before in chronological sequence, because this I cannot rise without projecting phenomena. So it rises, projected phenomena. The first phenomena it projects is this body, which it experiences itself, and then through the senses of this body, it projects all these phenomena. So the arising of this thought called I and all the other thoughts is simultaneous, but the sense in which this is the first thought, it's not in chronological sequence, but in causal sequence. Sometimes you can have a cause and an effect can occur simultaneously. For example, if you've got a stationary billiard ball, a moving billiard ball comes and hits it. The hitting causes the stationary billiard ball to start moving. So the cause is the hitting. The effect is the beginning movement. That occurs simultaneously. So in chronological sequence, they are simultaneous. But in causal sequence, it's the hitting that causes the stationary ball to move. We can't say that the moving of the stationary ball causes the hitting. In a causal sequence, the hitting is the cause, and the moving of the ball is the effect. In the same way, that is the sense in which Bhagavan says the ego is the first thought, because it's the thought that causes all other thoughts. What is the difference between this thought, the ego, which Bhagavan calls the thought called I, and all other thoughts? All the other thoughts, no other thought is aware of itself. Whereas this ego is that which is aware of all other thoughts and of itself. So it is all other thoughts are objects perceived, they're phenomena, whereas the ego is the perceiving subject. That is why in a causal sequence, the ego comes first, because without a perceiver, you can't have anything perceived. So the ego is the first cause. all sequences of cause and effect come into existence only when the ego rises. So philosophers have been, since ancient times, philosophers have been speculating what is the first cause. Is it God, or is it a Big Bang, or is it who knows what? Bhagavan says the first cause is the ego. When you rise from sleep in the morning, you are the first cause, and you bring all this into existence. So the thought called I alone is the first thought of the mind. This is something Bhagavan says in other paragraphs of Nāṉ Ār, and he said it repeatedly. It's such a key, one of the key principles of his teachings. And then just to clarify terminology, in the next sentence he says, Aduve ahankaram. It alone is the ego, or that alone is the ego. That means the thought called I is the ego. What he sometimes refers to as the thought called I is what he at other times refers to as ego. Why he calls it a thought? Because our real nature, the real I, is doesn't appear and disappear. This is the I that appears and disappears is not real, it's a thought. So it's a thought, but it's the first thought. It's the thought that thinks all other thoughts, but is aware of all other thoughts. So such is the nature of the ego, or the thought called I. Then he connects back to the subject he's talking about, which is about the prana, except in this next sentence, instead of using the word prana, he uses a simple Tamil word muchu, which means breath. So, ahankaram engirandu utpatio angirandutan muchum kilambu kindridu. That means from where the ego arises, from there alone the breath also rises up, sprouts, emerges, or starts. That kilambu means to rise up or start. And then in the next sentence he comes to a conclusion. Ahayal manam adangam podu prananam, pranam adangam podu manamum adangam. That means, therefore, when the mind ceases, subsides or disappears, the prana also ceases, and when the prana ceases, the mind also ceases. So why he's saying this here, to explain how pranayama can bring about a temporary cessation of mind. If you can restrain your breath so effectively, I mean, most of us, if you haven't practiced pranayama, particular techniques, and trained yourself in the technique, if you try to hold your breath, sooner or later you'll start breathing again. But if your yogis practice it practice particular techniques whereby they can hold their breath to the point that the mind subsides. And then, so mind and breath both subside or cease together. As soon as the mind arises, breath also arises with it. So it's not really, there's no enduring benefit, or not even actually a short-term benefit. I mean, the best use we can make of it, if we want to, but this wasn't encouraged by Bhagavan, but for those who liked such practices, who were attracted to such practices, Bhagavan said, okay, you control your breath to calm down the mind. But before the mind goes into a state of complete cessation, like a sleep-like state, use that calmness of mind to turn your attention back towards yourself. That is the only benefit you can gain. And Bhagavan said, even these, for this, even arduous exercises of pranayama, which have to be taught by a guru because they can be potentially quite dangerous, Bhagavan said these are all unnecessary. If you want to do this, the simplest thing to do is just watch your breath. If you watch your breath, automatically the breathing and the mind will calm down. But why should we go that roundabout way? If we just watch the ego, if we watch ourselves, if we attend to ourselves, the same calmness is brought about directly. So why to take an indirect way when the direct way is available to us? It's at this point, after he says, therefore when the mind ceases, the breath, or the prana also ceases, and when the prana ceases, mind also ceases. It's in this context that 3 other sentences were later added. I'll talk about those later, but for the time being I'll go on with the way the paragraph as it was originally written by Bhagavan. So that's a concluding sentence. He says, therefore. Then he goes on to say, Pranan Manatin, giving further explanation, Pranan Manatin Stula Rupam Enapadam. That means the prana is called or is said to be the gross form of the mind. And in the next sentence he says, that is, the mind never rises without experiencing a body as I, but when we experience a body as I, we never experience a dead body as I. It's always a living body. So there's always life there. So life and mind always go together. There's never, the mind can never rise without rising along with life, along with the prana. And in the next sentence he says, Marana kalam varayal, manam pranan udalil vetu kondirandu, udal marikum kalatil, Adane kavandu kondu po kindradu. That means, until the time of death, the mind keeps the prana in the body. And at the moment the body dies, grasping it, it goes. That means grasping, the word kavandu means grasping, grabbing. It can also mean stealing or forcibly, taking forcibly. Forcibly taking or stealing the prana, the mind departs. At the time of death, the mind goes, metaphorically speaking, the mind departs and it takes the prana along with it. So the life is never left in the body without the mind being there. There is an objection people to raise to this, but that is what Bhagavan answered in the interpolation, but that is coming down a level for people who aren't ready to accept the simple truth as explained by Bhagavan. Then in the next sentence, again it's a conclusion. Ahayal pranayamam manam adaka sahayame andri mano nasam sayadu. This is the final sentence. This is the concluding sentence of the whole thing. Therefore, pranayama is just an aid to make the mind cease. Obviously, we can understand from all that he said before, it's an aid to make the mind cease temporarily, not permanently, but will not bring about manonasa. Manonasa means annihilation of mind, a permanent cessation of mind. To bring about permanent cessation, as Bhagavan emphasized repeatedly, the only means is vichara. So this was the paragraph as it was. These were all ideas recorded by Shiv Prakashan Pillai, and later Shiv Prakashan Pillai had published the questions and answers in a question and answer format. When the first time it was, though he had asked the questions back in 1900, 1901, 1902, around that time, when he first came to Bhagavan, he asked those questions, and he noted down Bhagavan's answers. And in those days, because Bhagavan was talking very little, a lot of the answers, Bhagavan would either write in sand, or sometimes Shiv Prakashan Pillai would bring a slate and chalk, so Bhagavan would write on the slate, or sometimes pieces of paper. So Shiv Prakashan Pillai was able to keep a very exact record of what Bhagavan had, because Bhagavan had written it, he was able to keep a very exact record of what Bhagavan had said. And it wasn't on one occasion he asked all the questions. In a series of visits, he asked these questions, he noted down the answers in his notebooks, and he would occasionally rearrange them and everything. But he never thought of publishing them until 1923. He had written a long Tamil verse, a biography of Bhagavan. And in that biography, he summarized some of the teachings that Bhagavan had given him. So when some friends of his wanted to publish this, he gave 14 questions. He compiled out of the questions and answers he had asked Bhagavan, he compiled, I think it was 13 questions and answers, and that was given as an appendix in that biography. So that was 1923. When many people read that, they were very interested in this dialogue. So they asked Shiv Prakashan Pillai, did Bhagavan say anything more than that? So then another version with 30 questions and answers, and also some miscellaneous sayings of Bhagavan, which not connected to any particular question, that was published. And from that was maybe about 1924-25 that was published. Soon after that was published, Bhagavan himself rearranged it in the form of an essay, removing certain things which he felt weren't so necessary to make it into a connected exposition. So as far as we know, this was something Bhagavan did. It's very rare for Bhagavan to write anything of his own accord, but it seems Bhagavan did. Maybe someone suggested it to Bhagavan, but anyway, all we know is Bhagavan himself wrote it as this essay. So when he wrote the essay, this is the paragraph as he wrote it. And this is what Shiv Prakashan Pillai had recorded. But in more recent versions, there's another 3 sentences. Those were probably added around the mid-1930s. So whereas Bhagavan wrote the essay probably in 1926 or 27, it was about 10 years later these other 3 sentences were added. They were added after the sentence in which Bhagavan says, therefore, when the mind ceases, the prana also ceases, and when the prana ceases, the mind also ceases. We can assume someone would have objected. No, Bhagavan, when someone's sleeping, we can see them breathing. So it can't be right, but when the mind, when the mind subsides, the breath also subsides. We can all see for ourselves. So, seeing that person wasn't ready to understand the depth and subtlety of what Bhagavan was saying, Bhagavan presumably gave a reply, which that person noted down, and later suggested that it should be added. And Bhagavan, being Bhagavan, would have said, okay, you add it. But actually it detracts from the main thrust of this paragraph. So there are 3 sentences. The first one is Anal Shushuptil Manam Adangirundu Podilum Pranam Adanga Villai. However, in sleep, even though the mind has ceased, the prana does not cease. Bhagavan may well have said this to someone who wasn't ready to grasp what he is saying. But as Bhagavan made very clear elsewhere, the body exists only in the view of the ego. The ego is the thought eye, the root of the perceiving element of the mind. The mind is a collection of thoughts. All bar one thought are perceived. One thought is perceiving them, that is the ego, the thought called I. So when this thought called I subsides, everything else subsides along with it, including the body. Because as he said in the 4th paragraph, there's no such thing, the world is nothing but thoughts. When there are thoughts, there's a world. When there's no thoughts, there's no world. It's only when we rise as ego, but we project the world, which is nothing but though these appear to be physical phenomena, it seems to us that all these things exist independent of us. We all assume that when we're asleep, the world goes on as usual, and we wake up in the morning, we see our clock has moved on 6 or 7 or 8 hours, and we turn on the news and we hear so many things, atrocities have happened in the world in our absence. So it seems, and we ask other people, and they say, yes, I was working a night shift, it was a terrible night. So we assume the whole world is going on in our absence. But when do we assume that? Only when the mind has risen and sees all this. According to Bhagavan, all this is just a dream. When we perceive it, it seems to exist. When we don't perceive it, it doesn't exist at all. So in sleep, according to Bhagavan, there is no body, no world, no prana, nothing. But for people who weren't ready to accept this, which many people naturally aren't ready to accept it, Bhagavan would come down to their level. So that is what he's doing here. So he says, yes, however, in sleep, even though the mind has ceased, the prana does not cease. Why is that? He gives a simple explanation to suit such people. Deyatim padukapin nimitamum dehamanadum maritu vittado endru pira ayamura vannamum ivaru ishwara nyetial epatirkirudu. That means it is arranged thus by the niyati, the ordinance of God, or the law of God, for the purpose of protecting the body, and so that other people do not wonder whether that body has died. Well, sorry, that should have been whether the body has died. I think I mistyped that. So that's a simple explanation to suit people who aren't ready to understand things in a deeper way. And then in the next sentence he says, Jagratilum samadhilum adangu kirapodu pranan adangu kiradu. Here he's trying to bring it back to the subject that he was talking about. When the mind ceases in waking and in samadhi, the prana ceases. So having made a concession to that person, he brings back to the main point, which is that when the mind ceases, the prana also ceases. He says, in waking and in samadhi. Samadhi there meaning that the type of samadhi I was talking about earlier, a state of manolaya in which, like the yogi went into on the banks of the Ganga, it's a temporary state of dissolution of mind brought about by pranayama and other such yoga practices. So, and then I give a bit of a note here for those who are interested. These 3 sentences were not in the manuscript of the essay handwritten by Bhagavan, which was reproduced in Mountain Path, June 1993, pages 44 to 47. That's available online if anyone wants to see it. On the ashram website, they've got all the old mountain paths, so you can look up that. Nor were they included in either in the essay version of the first edition, 1931 of Sri Ramana Nutaratu, the Tamil collected works, or in the 1932 editions of either the 30 or the 28 question and answer versions. As I say, Bhagavan wrote this essay. From the 30 question and answer version, Bhagavan compiled this essay. Later, but that 30 question and answer version continued to be published for some years after that, up till the early 1930s. I know there was definitely a 1932 edition of it. But at the same year, there was also a 28 question and answer version. I think the first edition of the 28 question and answer version was the 1932 one. That 1932 one was based on the essay version. It was a sort of back adaptation. Bhagavan had adapted the 30 question and answer version into the essay, but because thinking that people like to have questions and answers, someone in the ashram modified the 30 question and answer version using the wording that Bhagavan had used in the essay version. So the 28 question and answer version, which is the version which is now available, the question and answer version which is now available, that is a further adaptation based on the essay version. The questions from the 30 question and answer version and the answers based on the wording Bhagavan used in the essay version. So in 1932, these three sentences weren't there. The earliest, and also I checked, one time I went through all Shiv Prakashan Pillai's notebook and saw all the different versions he had edited. I never found any of these sentences there. The earliest edition in which I've seen them included was the 1936 edition of the 28 question and answer version. So I suspect it was probably added there first and later in the essay version. And then what I say in the next two paragraphs is more or less what I've explained already, but I'll just read it again. According to Bhagavan's core teachings, the body and world are both mental creations, so they seem to exist only so long as they're perceived by the ego, which is the root and core of the mind, and hence they do not exist when the mind has subsided in sleep. For those who are willing to accept this teaching, the idea that in sleep, even though the mind has ceased, the prana does not cease, is not an issue. That's what Bhagavan said in that previous sentence. That's not a problem for those who are ready to understand it, because if the existence of the body, and hence of the prana that animates it, is dependent upon the existence of the mind, it is clear that in sleep, when the mind ceases, the prana also ceases, as he said explicitly in the previous sentence. Therefore, if these three interpolated sentences were something that Bhagavan actually said, which quite probably it is, it's unlikely, but someone would have added something there but Bhagavan hadn't actually said. So it's quite likely Bhagavan did give that as an answer. But why he gave it, he presumably said so in reply to someone who objected to the previous sentence, arguing that when a person is sleeping, others can see him or her breathing. Assuming that it's in that context that he gave this reply, in which case he would have said this as a concession to their limited understanding, seeing that they were not willing to accept his teaching, but the body, prana, world, and all other phenomena seem to exist only in the view of the ego, and hence they cease to exist whenever the mind ceases to exist, as in dreamless sleep. So that is the import of the paragraph as it was originally written by Bhagavan. The addition of these three sentences actually rather detracts from the main message that Bhagavan is saying, but somehow it's been added there, and it is. But I think it's important for people to recognize. Otherwise, people quite naturally ask why Bhagavan is suddenly saying, why he said one thing in the next sentence, and in the following sentence he seems to backtrack on what he's just said. This is the reason why. Someone objected to it. And because that person wasn't ready to grasp it, Bhagavan wasn't ready to grasp what he meant, Bhagavan came down to their level and gave an explanation to satisfy their curiosity. So the main message of this paragraph is that though we can bring about temporary cessation of mind by pranayama and also by other means, these do not bring about, none of these other means bring about the destruction of the mind, which is our goal, that can be brought about only by vichara, by self-investigation. And he continues that theme in the next paragraph, which we'll discuss next month, if we have a meeting next month.
This paragraph puts very simply and beautifully the problem that I feel I have with my previous practice, which is I've been a Zen Buddhist for 17 years now, listening to others. And the practice can help the mind settle down and quieten down. But when I get up from sitting and continue my life, I'm picking everything back up again and continuing with all the problems, and I feel like I'm going round and round.
Yeah.
So to see this is quite uplifting.
Yes.
And to hear that there is a way of sort of permanently removing these obstacles,
yes,
whatever they are. You know, my heart sort of leaps for joy, you know,
yes,
saying that's it, that's what I'm
yes,
after. So for me, it comes down to, it always does, the how. How do I do this? What is self-enquiry? Because I'm very new to this.
Right.
What do I need to do?
Right. Okay. Before I answer that, a reflection on what you just said. One of the beauties of this practice, which becomes clear when we practice it more and more, is unlike certain other practices where it's recommended you have 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever set aside for meditation. In this practice, that is optional. It is sometimes nice to set aside time, but it need not be a regular time or anything. But the main thing is, this is a practice we can do at all times and in all circumstances, because we can attend to anything that we're aware of. And the one thing that we are always aware of is ourself. In order to be aware of anything other than ourselves, we must be aware of ourselves. Because when we're aware, I am aware of this. We may not think it as a thought, but that awareness is there. We're always aware of ourselves as a subject, all the other things are the objects. So that self-awareness is the background of all experience. Whether phenomena appear, as in waking and dream, or don't appear, as in sleep, the fundamental self-awareness is always there, which is why we say, I am awake, I dreamt, I slept. It's the same I. That I is there referring to the fundamental self-awareness. Because now that awareness I is mixed up with this body. I am sitting here, I am doing this and everything. But when we say I slept, in sleep there's no awareness of any body or anything. There's just the fundamental self-awareness. So that is always there as the background to our experience. But one often used to compare it to the screen in a cinema. Whether a picture is projected on the screen or not, the screen is always there. When the picture is projected on it, if we're interested in the picture, we overlook the screen. We don't go to a cinema paying so much money just to look at the screen. We go there to watch all the action, because that's what interests us. So what interests us now is this world. So our attention is going outwards. We are overlooking the fundamental self-awareness. It's always there, but it's, though we are always self-aware, we are negligently self-aware, so to speak. We don't pay heed to the self-awareness. So all the practice is, instead of being negligently self-aware, to be attentively self-aware. So in other words, to be, well, it's very difficult to words have their limitations, because words generally, language was devised to express phenomena, thoughts, feelings, ideas, perceptions, and reason about all these things. That's why we developed language, as a means of communication. But communication is always about things other than ourselves. But so to capture what is this practice in words is not really possible. The words can point to it. So we are all aware, I am. That awareness, I am, is our fundamental self-awareness. So instead of overlooking that fundamental awareness, trying to be attentively self-aware, that is all the practice is. So the more attentively we are self-aware, the more our attention is drawn from other things, withdrawn from other things. Because it is possible for us to attend to a number of things at the same time. Maybe not if we go down to each split second, we may be attending to just one thing. But within a second, we attend to so many things. So often we are multitasking. We are talking, thinking some other thought, or maybe cutting the vegetables or things. We do so many things simultaneously. But at the background, whatever other activities body or mind or speech are doing, the self-awareness is always there. So by trying to divert our attention back towards ourselves, towards this fundamental self-awareness, we are slowly withdrawing it from other things. And obviously in the midst of activities, a certain amount of attention is needed, or at least so it seems to us. According to Bhagavan, even that is not true, but actually all the external activities are going on according to destiny. Whether we attend to it or not, these things will go on. If we are to, whatever work our body, speech and mind are to do, they will be made to do. So it's not actually necessary for us to attend to anything else. But for most of us, it seems necessary. I can't drive the car without attending. But people will say. But most people, when they drive to work in the morning, it's a familiar route. They reach work. They can't remember anything that happened. Very, very little attention has actually been paid. It's almost, they've been driving on autopilot, so to speak. So, like that, we do so many activities we do with minimum attention. Most of the time, our mind is thinking other thoughts about the problems in the office, about problems at home, about how to pay the mortgage, how to pay this bill. There's so many things that preoccupy us, which aren't immediately necessary. Okay, we've got to pay the mortgage or the rent at the end of the month, but it's not necessary for us to think about it now. But still, that if we're having financial difficulties, that worry will be there in the back of our mind. It keeps on propping up. How am I going to manage to pay this month's installment? So that's the nature of the mind. But actually, it's not necessary for us to think most of these thoughts. When the time comes, the appropriate action will be done. And if we're not able to pay it, we're not able to pay it. So if we're going to default and there's going to be a problem, whatever problems are going to come, are going to come. But we are so much preoccupied with the small problems of our life, but we take more interest in those than in the background self-awareness. So we are slowly, by this practice, we are trying to wean our interest away from other things, back towards knowing ourselves. So it's all a matter of interest. It's all a matter of what do we want. If our main preoccupation in life is to buy a better car, to have a better house, to have a happier relationship, to have more money in the bank, to gain a position of more influence in society, or this, or whatever, or do help for the world, solve so many problems that are there in the world. If these are our priorities, our mind will naturally be going to those things. But Bhagavan said all these things that are going, the whole of the external world is like a cinema. It's already, what is going to happen, it's already charted out, it's already there on the film. So we can either involve ourselves in it. If we watch a very interesting film, we identify with the main character in the film. We get completely involved in it. Even though we can't do anything to change it, we live through that as if it's our experience. So in the same way, we live through this life as if it's our experience because we are so identified with it, so involved in it. That is not necessary. So it's possible for us to withdraw our interest from other things and turn it and focus our interest on knowing ourselves. But because of vasanas means the propensities, the habits, or we are so accustomed to believing that we get happiness, but our happiness depends on external circumstances, but we're constantly thinking about these things. So to wean our mind away from all these interests and cares, concerns, preoccupations, takes time and it takes effort. We have to slowly cultivate interest in knowing ourselves and giving up interest in other things, accepting that other things are going to happen as they're going to happen. Ke sara sara, whatever will be, will be. So we think we can change things, but according to Bhagavan, we cannot change anything. We can try. We can want to change it, we can try to change it, but actually whatever is going to be is going to be. Whatever is to happen will happen, no matter how much we try to stop it. And what is not to happen is not going to happen, how much we try to make it happen. So our interest in the external world is of no benefit to us or anyone else. If we want the real benefit, if we accept Bhagavan's teaching that there's not an iota of happiness in any of the external phenomena, happiness is our real nature. We seem to, if I like chocolate, and I haven't had chocolate for an hour, the hankering for chocolate will be there in my mind. And if someone gives me a piece of chocolate, I put it in my mouth, so nice this chocolate is. The pleasure I feel in eating that piece of chocolate is because the hankering for it at that moment subsides. When the hankering subsides, hankering is an agitation of the mind. When the agitation of the mind subsides, at least to a limited extent, the happiness that is our real nature shines forth. So all the pleasure we experience from external things is the temporary subsidence of our hankering. So according to Bhagavan, happiness is our real nature. If we want to experience unlimited, permanent happiness, we can only find it within. We cannot find it outside. So if we accept this, even tentatively, and it's very reasonable to accept it, when we think about our experiences, all that Bhagavan says, like Bhagavan says outrageous things, what most people would say is outrageous, but when the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When the ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That is, most people will not at all be willing to accept it, but actually it's our experience. Are we aware of anything when the ego subsides in sleep? Are we aware of anything? It's only when we wake up again, we infer, oh, this world existed when I was asleep. But how do we know that? How can we know that anything exists when we don't perceive it? So what Bhagavan says is actually very reasonable, but it's a matter of are we willing to accept it or not? That is up to us. Bhagavan doesn't force anyone. Like when someone asked him, oh, but Bhagavan, you say when the mind subsides, the breath also subsides. But we can see when people are sleeping, their mind has subsided, their breath hasn't subsided. Bhagavan doesn't try to force that person to accept his teaching. He sees that person isn't willing to, so he goes along with them. He comes down to their level. So Bhagavan doesn't force us to do anything. So this is a very free path. We are free to follow it or not to follow it. It's up to us. If we don't follow it, we have to experience the consequences. If we do follow it, we experience the benefits. The choice is ours. So if we want to go out and solve the problems of the world, or if we want to have more money, or if we want to have greater status, or if we want political power, or okay, we're free. Go and Bhagavan says you go and play your games. When children brought fireworks to Bhagavan, he played fireworks with them. So Bhagavan, for Bhagavan, we're all children. All our little preoccupations in the world are just like the children who, for Deepavali, they brought fireworks and they wanted Bhagavan to play fireworks with them. He played along with them. But if we want the benefit that Bhagavan is offering us, we should pay heed to his teachings, and if we are willing to accept that, if we're willing to give it a try, we can try and put this into practice. And most forms of spiritual practice on the mental level are called meditation, because we're using it's an exercise of the mind. Bhagavan, sometimes he referred to this practice as meditation. Sometimes he referred to it as Swarupa Dhyana. That means meditation on one's own nature, meditation on oneself. But generally, he referred to it as vichara. There's a Sanskrit word, and an equivalent Tamil word was natam, which means, both of those words means investigation. And if you want to investigate something, if you're investigating something for the first time, you learn how to investigate by investigating. If you can be told the whole way to the end, then there's no need to investigate. The need for investigation is because by investigating, when scientists do a research, they start off and they find some things work, some things don't work. The things that work, they go along those lines, and then they have to branch it. They go along this is a dead end. They go on another branch. So any investigation, you discover how to investigate more effectively by investigating. So this is a path of self-investigation. Bhagavan often used to say, when people asked him how to do this, Bhagavan said, if it was an objective path, the way could be shown by someone else. But this is not objective. It's a non-objective investigation. So no one else can show you. You don't need anyone else to show you the way in your own home. You have to enter in and find your way yourself. So clues Bhagavan has given us, such as turn your attention back towards yourself. What exactly these words mean, we can find out only by practice. To take a very gross example, if you want to learn to ride a bicycle, you can read books about balancing, and you can read about center of gravity, and you can understand the physics and everything. But how to learn to ride a bicycle? No one can learn to ride a bicycle except by getting on a bicycle, falling, getting up, falling, getting up, and slowly learning how to balance. It's exactly the same in this path. We are trying to remain balanced in a state between sleep, where the mind has subsided, and waking, where the mind is active, going outwards. So we try to remain balanced in between, where the mind is, where we are fully aware, but not aware of things. So that is the real meaning of samadhi. Often samadhi is explained as samadhi. Di means the intellect, the mind. Sama means equal, so it's a state of balance. And sometimes it's compared to walking on a razor's edge. We can't fall this way, we can't fall that way. We don't want to fall asleep, we don't want to fall into the state of thought. We want to remain balanced in a state of pure self-awareness. That is the real meaning of samadhi.
Michael,
Yes.
Hi, Meg.
Yes.
I just wanted to share something because you were saying there about we have to practice this, and I'm very new to. I wrote you by the way, so I'll say hello.
Yes. Okay. Right.
Nice to be
Yeah.
with you. And so I'm quite new.
Yes.
I've only really heard about these teachings for a few months, but when I've been in London this weekend, and when I was all this weekend, I've been just looking around. Isn't it incredible that I am? This is all my creation in a way,
Yes.
and that is so incredible to just keep asking myself.
Yes.
And all these beautiful buildings, and
Yes.
then the big thing of Donald Trump appearing.
Yes.
It's incredible. And that's it just blows my mind. But wow, this is appearing and that's appearing, and to question within.
Yeah.
Am I just? Is this all?
Yeah.
Is this all just a dream?
Yeah.
This moment appearing this because it is.
Yes. Yeah. When we're dreaming, it all seems as real as this.
Yeah.
But why a dream seems real? Because in a dream we experience a dream body as I. What is actually real is only I. So when we experience a dream body as I, we are thereby experiencing that dream body as real. And since that dream body is a part of a dream world, the whole dream world seems real. So while we're dreaming, it all seems perfectly real. But as soon as we leave that dream and come to this dream, the identification with that dream body is broken. And as soon as that is broken, we don't have any doubt when we wake up from a dream, or had I traveled to some other world. No, everyone, even a child recognizes a dream is just its own. I mean, may not think of it in these terms, but it understands its own creation.
By asking myself that, this is what's been coming to me. By using my trip to London as another way of self-inquiry, looking at everything in that way. It's been just made me think it's all a bit of a laugh.
Yes.
That's it, that's all.
So there are so many problems in this world. Who is responsible for them? If we're dreaming, in dream we sometimes see problems. There may be fighting going on or something. What is the best way of solving all the problems we see in a dream?
Just
waking up, yeah. So Bhagavan has given a simple solution for all the problems of the world. But are we ready to accept that solution? That is the question. Yes?
I think just in terms of implementation of what you said earlier, like we should focus on the awareness no matter what's happening, because life is happening in its
Yes.
So how does one go about implementing it, in the sense like you're at work and trying to solve some problem? So how do you prevent from getting caught up in that and remaining focused on the self?
Again, it's something we have to, by practice we will learn to do so. To some, it's a matter of extent. The whole process is we are trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves. By turning our attention towards ourselves, we're withdrawing it from other things. We can only do so to a certain extent at the moment because we still have so much interest in things. Bhagavan may say all things, everything that is going to happen will happen automatically whether we attend to it or not. Bhagavan may say that, but that is not our experience. It seems to us when we go to work, but if we don't attend to that, it's not going to get done. That's how it seems to us. So it's okay to continue to, because we feel that need to attend to these things, continue. But that's why the way to make progress in this path is slowly, slowly, gradually, gradually, gently, gently. This is not a forceful path of yoga. Bhagavan sometimes used to give an analogy. He used to say, if a cow is supposed to be in its stall, but it's gone out and looking for nice green grass to eat, if you go running after it with a stick, it's going to run here and there. It's going to be very difficult for you to catch it. All other spiritual paths, particularly yogas, are like running after the runaway cow with a stick. You're going to have a lot of trouble. And the cow can probably run faster than you, so you're probably never going to catch it. But whereas this path is a gentle path. It's like taking a bunch of green grass and showing it to the cow, and slowly, slowly leading it back to its stall. So this is a gentle path. We can't force the mind to turn within. So long as we've got strong outward-going vasanas, Vishaya vasanas, so long as we're so interested in this world, we're interested in life, we're interested in the work we're doing, we're interested in taking care of our family, and all these things seem to depend on us. So many things that happen in this world, we think, if I don't attend to it, how is it going to happen? So long as it seems to be, go along with that, but slowly, 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 gently, gently, introduce this practice into your life. Sadhguru used to give a nice analogy. There was a very poor Arab trader who used to travel in the desert. And he would travel from place to place, trading whatever little goods he could buy in one place and sell in another place. So all day long, he and his camel are traveling in the hot sun. And at night time, it becomes very, very cold in the desert. So at night time, he put up his tent, and he got into his tent. And the camel is tied up outside, sleeping outside. So after he'd been sleeping for a short while, he finds the camel's muzzle, his nose is inside the tent. And he thinks, poor creature, he's been carrying me all day in the hot sun and now it's very cold, so at least let him have his nose inside. So he goes back to sleep again. When he next wakes up, the camel's head is inside. And he thinks, okay, there's room for its head and me. And little by little, more and more of the camel. And in the morning, the camel is in the tent and he's outside. So, like that, Saram used to say, let this practice, at least let the nose of the camel into the tent. Introduce this practice into your life at least a little. And slowly, slowly, it will take over your whole life, and you yourself will be swallowed, and that alone will, what is real alone will remain. That pure self-awareness alone will remain.
Thank you, Michael, I just wondered if we could turn to the self-investigation.
Yes.
And I just wondered if it would be helpful if you could help us distinguish between the I as the ego and that which is behind the I, the beyond the ego, the self or Brahman, or what the Buddhists refer to in negatives, the unformed, the unoriginated, and unborn, or what Bhagavan used to call, as I understand it, I am that I am. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, firstly, there is only one I.
Right.
What is called Brahman or Atma-swarupa or is our real nature. That is what ourself as we actually are. The ego is ourself as we seem to be. It's not two different selves. It is, one is the reality, the other is the appearance. To use an analogy, our real nature is like the rope. The ego is like the snake. There aren't two different things there, a rope and a snake. There's only one thing, one rope, but seems to be a snake. So also there's only one thing, our real nature, which seems to be the ego. And ego is characterized by rising and subsiding, appearing and disappearing. And whenever it appears, it appears as I am this body. It always projects and grasps a body as itself. When we're dreaming, for example, we experience ourselves as a person, as a body in that dream. So, but that person, that body didn't exist independent of us seeing it. As soon as we begin to dream, we project a body, experience that body as I. Through the five senses of that body, we project a world, and we experience all the phenomena that constitute that world. According to Bhagavan, exactly the same thing is happening in this waking state. Another important feature of the ego, it seems to exist because we don't look at it carefully enough. Bhagavan compares it to a phantom. Supposing you are walking in a forest on a dark, well, it's a moonlit night, but because of the very dense foliage, very little light is coming down, so it's very dark there. But because the little bits of moonlight are coming down here and there, you see the forms fleeting around you, and you're afraid because they look like ghosts, phantoms. Those phantoms appear to be phantoms only when you catch them out of the corner of your eye. If you look at any one of them, you'll see it's just a bit of moonlight. It seems to be a phantom because you don't look at it carefully. Likewise, the ego seems to exist because we don't look at it carefully enough. In other words, so long as we're looking elsewhere, so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves, we seem to be ego. But if we turn our attention back towards ourselves, to look at ourselves very keenly, we'll find there's no such thing. Just as if you see a snake on the path in the dim light, Bhagavan tells you, don't worry, it's not a snake, it's a rope. But to you it still looks like a snake, doesn't it? So you're afraid. You don't want to go further along the path. Then Bhagavan says, look at it very carefully and see for yourself. If you look at it very carefully, what do you see? You see just a rope. What has happened to the snake? It has disappeared. How did it disappear? Because you looked at it carefully. Exactly the same is the nature of the ego. The ego seems to exist when we're looking elsewhere, when we don't look at it carefully enough. When we look at it carefully, we see all that is there is the underlying reality, which is our real nature, Atma-vichara, Brahman, which is infinite Satchidananda, which is what we are even now. So the ego is just what we seem to be when we don't look at ourselves. Looking at ourselves, I'm still talking metaphorically, when we don't attend to ourselves keenly enough. So ego and awareness of phenomena are inseparable. The very nature of the ego is to be constantly aware of phenomena. Because if instead of being aware of phenomena, if it turns its attention back to itself to try and be aware of itself alone, it dissolves and disappears. And what remains is the pure and infinite self-awareness that we actually are. in a few places in Day by Day, Devraj Mudliya record, Bhagavan generally spoke very, very simply. He said the same thing when looking outwards is called mind, when looking back within is Atma-swarupa.
I had a question about free will.
Yes.
So if everything, as you said, is predestined and life is going to be out
Yes.
as it is to be,
Yes.
then do we really have free will? And what is action then? Because we do play roles in our life, we have to play roles in our life, and we can't live a life without action. How important is that action then?
Right.
With meaning? And does it really have an impact on anything?
Yeah.
Or is it just a response? Is our response to what happens while our destiny is playing out, our free will is only to the extent that we have the ability to respond this way or that way. We can't make an impact on what's going to happen.
Right. When we say this word free will, there are two ideas there. The basic idea is will. And the second idea is that will is free. So when we discuss this subject, it's actually better to separate these two, because then we can view it more clearly. We all have a will. Whatever is destined to happen is going to happen. But we are free either to like it or to dislike it or to be indifferent to it. So long, because we have risen, we experience all that happens is according to prarabdha. Prarabdha means our destiny. So we experience a prarabdha because we have risen as an ego. As an ego, we cannot but have likes and dislikes, desires, because our real nature is infinite happiness. When we rise as an ego, we are limiting ourselves as this small little person, this body. So we cannot, as this finite person, we cannot experience the infinite happiness that we actually are. So we are dissatisfied. Nothing in this world can ever satisfy us. We may think, if I have this, I'll be satisfied. If I have that, I'll be satisfied. We work hard for it. When we actually get it, we're happy for a little while, but we find we're still dissatisfied, so we want something else. This is the nature of the ego. So the desire is the very nature of ego. We can't avoid having desires. And desires manifest as our likes and dislikes and everything. So though everything that we are to experience in this lifetime is already preordained, we cannot change that. We are free either to like it or to dislike it. That is, we have likes and dislikes. Those likes and dislikes, we are free to like what we want and to choose. We like what we like and we dislike what we. It's within our power to either to have desire for something or to be indifferent to it. That ability we have. But so our will is the totality of all our likes, dislikes, desires, fears, hopes, interests, aspirations. All these things constitute our will. And the elements of our will are what are called vasanas. So some vasanas are vasanas of desire, some are vasanas of fear, some are vasanas of likes, dislikes, all these things. Why our will, the freedom of our will seems to be limited, actually we have unlimited freedom. Because our nature is we are the infinite whole. When we limit ourselves as ego, our will also seems to be limited. There seem to be restrictions on our freedom of will. But people generally take free will to mean the freedom to do what we want. But actually, we have a will. Free will means that our will is free. It doesn't mean we are free to do what we want. We are free to want what we want. Whether we can do what we want is an entirely different matter. But people assume that free will means you can do whatever you want. That is not. That's confusing different ideas. Freedom to act is limited because we have to experience our prarabdha. When certain things we are destined to experience, because we have likes and dislikes, we try to avoid certain things, and we try to experience certain things. Some of those things that we try to avoid or try to experience, it may be our likes and dislikes may happen to be in sync with what is destined to happen. So I want to earn a lot of money and buy a big house. If it is my destiny, I will earn a lot of money and I'll buy a big house. So my desire and the destiny happen to be in sync. But if it is my desire to end all the wars in the world, it's a bit unlikely that I'll be able to achieve that. But I can still want to end all the wars in the world. I'm free to want it. So my will is free. I'm not free to bring it about. If it was my destiny, it would happen. But it's highly unlikely that would be part of our destiny, because the nature of the world, what is allotted to us as our destiny is a mixture of pleasant and unpleasant things.
And how to strive to want to try and get what you want?
Well, by striving to get what you want, all you are achieving, you cannot get anything that you're not destined to experience. But if you're constantly trying to achieve things, whether you're destined to experience it or not doesn't matter. What you're destined to experience, you'll experience. But by the very trying to experience it, you are creating fresh karma. That's called agamya. That agamya has fruit. The fruit of that agamya you cannot experience in this lifetime. That goes to the store. There's a store called sanchita. Sanchita means accumulation or heap or pile. So all the fruits of actions that we've done, agamya is actions that we do by our own will. Often, many of the things that we're destined to experience, supposing, for example, you're destined to study and get a PhD. In order to study and get a PhD, you have to work quite hard. You have to go through, you have to get a BA and MA, and you have to do so many years of study and research and this and that and everything. So it involves doing actions. Because it's your destiny to get that PhD, those actions which you do in order to achieve that, they are already destined. But most people who earn PhD, they also want to earn that PhD. They're interested in working hard. So those actions that lead to the achievement of that PhD, they're according to destiny. They're being driven by destiny. But they're simultaneously being driven by the will, because we want to achieve that. So it doesn't matter whether if something is our destiny, we'll experience it. If it's not our destiny, we won't experience it. What agamya is those actions we do with our will. Doesn't matter whether they are destiny or not. If they're destiny, we'll seem to achieve it. If they're not destiny, we will seem to fail in our efforts. But the thing is, we are doing action by our will. We are trying to achieve that. All those create agamya, that the fruit of those agamya get added to the sanchita. From there, they are selected by the divine power, by God.
Sorry. You you won't add to Sanchita, it is Agami.
Sorry?
It is not Sanchita, it will be Agami. Like the things what we are doing, the karma in this present life,
Yes.
will be Agami, will be coming in the next life.
No, yeah, but
Sanchita is actually all the action you have done in the previous lives is the Sanchita.
no,
The word Prarabdha is only to the extent of the Sanchita that is assigned for this life.
yes, that's just what I mean. That's what I mean. Agamya means what is begun, what we are.
Sanchita, that is Agami, but you are.
No. Agamya is the actions you do. With the actions we do with volition are agamya. Those actions have fruit. The fruit of the agamya is added to sanchita.
No, that's Agami actually.
Sanchita is an accumulation of fruit, the karma pala.
That is previous, up to previous births, is Sanchita. Whatever you are doing in this life, which will have a result towards karma, will be Agami, and for the next life, this will be Sanchita. Whatever actions we do in the next life, which will have a bearing for the future life, will be Agami, it's not Sanchita. So whatever you are doing now to achieve the PhD with the will be Agami, not Sanchita. That will not be added to Sanchita.
Agamya is not fruit. Agamya is the action that bears fruit. So the actions we do in this lifetime with our will, the actions done by will are agamya. The fruit of those actions as we do each action, it gets added to the sanchita.
No.
Okay. Okay. Well. Okay. Anyway.
So action is important. Action is important.
Action is not important. What is important? What is significant is the will with which we do action. Some actions may be driven by destiny. Other actions may be driven by will. Many actions are driven by both destiny and will. But it doesn't matter about the actions themselves, don't matter. It's the will with which we do them.
Which will create.
Yes, it is the will which is. It's the will that creates the fruit. It's not the action itself, it's the will with which we do the action that creates the fruit. That fruit we cannot experience in this life.
Okay.
That can only be added to sanchita. Well, when it fructifies, is up to the divine will. Because we, in each lifetime, just for example, supposing our prarabdha is, say, 1 million bags of fruit. That is our prarabdha for this lifetime. We exhaust those 1 billion bags of fruit. But we desire so much more than we can experience, don't we? So generally, before we come to spiritual path, before we're trying to practice self-inquiry and self-investigation and self-surrender, we accumulate every life. We may exhaust 1 million bags of fruit. We accumulate 10 million. So we're always accumulating more. So sanchita is a huge mass. It's a bank account which is constantly accumulating. So God has lots of choice to what is, and He will select what is favorable for us, for our spiritual development in this life. This is why sometimes we see, for example, we see very good people have to suffer a lot. They have a really bad prarabdha. And we can't say, oh, because they're having a bad prarabdha, they're sinners, so they may be very good people, but for their spiritual development, God has decided that those bad karmas which they may have done crores of births before, this is the time for them to bear fruit, because this will be favorable for their spiritual development. We see other people who are pucker rogues. But they seem to have everything favorable. They have money and they're able to get power and all these things. They seem to enjoy. They may not be enjoying because their desires will make them miserable, but from a material point of view, they seem to be enjoying life. And that isn't because they're very good people. They got lots of good. They may only have a little good karma, and they're accumulating a lot of bad karma in the meanwhile. But it's all whatever we experience in this lifetime is our prarabdha. And the prarabdha has been selected by God for our own good. So we don't have to worry about prarabdha. Prarabdha will take care of itself.
Did Bhagavan also say there's no free will, there's no destiny?
Bhagavan, if there is ego, there is free will and there is destiny. If you investigate the ego and find there's no ego, then there's no free will, no destiny. Free will and destiny come along with the ego. They're part and parcel of the same package.
There's this assumption there's an entity, a non-entity that wants to get free from itself for salvation.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exist. So there's a kind of
it doesn't. The ego doesn't exist, but it seems to exist. And so long as the ego seems to exist, everything else seems to exist. And part of that everything else, the ego has a will, and it has to experience the fruit of its past actions. So it has both will and destiny. Bhagavan, many people say, oh, Bhagavan said everything is predestined, therefore there's no will. Bhagavan never said that. If we had no freedom of will, there would be all the spiritual instructions that are given by Bhagavan or by anyone are completely meaningless, because anyway it's all predestined, so we can't do anything about it. So that is a complete misinterpretation of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan said the ego is the root of both will and destiny. It is the ego's will. It's the ego that wants, I want this, I want that, I like this, I like that, I desire this, I fear that, I'm attached to this. It's the ego's will. And because of its acting according to its will, that the action according to its will is agamya. That creates fruit, which are added to sanchita. The sanchita is then, a selection of the sanchita is then experienced as prarabdha. So both will and fate, both exist so long as the ego exists. Both are as real as the ego. If we want to free ourselves from these things, we have to investigate the ego. Because so long as we look at anything else, we are sustaining the seeming existence of the ego. Only by the ego looking at itself will it dissolve and disappear. So
you can't, I'm asking this specific question because my friend is suffering from cancer.
Yes.
And she does a Buddhist chanting.
Yeah.
And she's convinced that that it's given her a lot of strength, and her belief is that by chanting she will change the current situation. So she's confused. She sometimes feels like I'm lost, and sometimes she feels I'm conquering my fear because of the chanting, and it's giving, and I'm going to change my destiny.
All right. She cannot change her destiny, but she can change the fear, because the fear is an element of will. The thing is, people often think about free will and destiny, they're in conflict with each other. They are not. Each have their own domain. Each reigns supreme within its own domain. Prarabdha, the domain of prarabdha, is all that we are to experience in our life. That is determined by prarabdha. The domain of will is what we want, what we like, what we fear. So, but by doing that chanting, that may give her peace, and it may reduce her fears. So it may be beneficial from that perspective, because that's within the realm of will. It cannot change what is destined to happen. When this body is going to die was predetermined at the moment, when it came into existence. And all that we are to experience in the course of this life is already predetermined. We cannot change that. But what we can change is our reaction to it. So, supposing I have cancer, I can be terrified about it. I can fear death. When is death going to come? And it can create so many. It can agitate me so much. Or I can say, it's all Bhagavan's will. After all, this body is going to die one day. So if it dies a little sooner or a little later, what difference does it make? I can cultivate that attitude of surrender. By cultivating that attitude of surrender, in other words, thy will be done, not my will but your will. By accepting whatever is to happen as the sweet will of Bhagavan, it doesn't matter. If we are in a state of surrender, it doesn't matter whether the body dies or not.
When you're in a state of surrender, does it mean that you don't even take action to try and cure? You do. But you don't push it around.
If it's your destiny, supposing it is your destiny, supposing I've got cancer, it's my destiny to have chemotherapy and to be cured, or at least to put it into remission for some time. Because it's my destiny to have that chemotherapy, when the doctor advises me to go for chemotherapy, I'll accept. I may have relatives who say, oh, no, it's much better to take herbs, or it's much better to do homeopathy, or it's much better to do prayers or something. Because it's my destiny to have the chemotherapy and to get the benefit of chemotherapy, at least on a temporary basis, my mind will go in that way. I will not listen to the well-wishers who advise me to take herbs or change my diet or something. I will have the chemotherapy. Or if it's not if I'm not destined to have that chemotherapy, I'll listen to the people who say take herbs or change your diet or something. And if that is destined to help me, that will help me. It's all according to destiny. And where free will and destiny, where they seem to come into conflict, is in the actions we do. Because we do actions by three instruments, by mind, speech, and body. These three instruments are, Sadhuam used to say, it's like one pen being operated by two clerks. The two clerks are fate and will. The senior clerk is fate. So the senior clerk, he has strict orders, what he has to write. So he will write, he always has priority. He will write whatever he's received instructions. The junior clerk, he can write whatever he wants within the confines. He cannot overwrite anything that the senior clerk has written. He can scribble, or he can write Ram, 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 or he can write letters to his girlfriend, or whatever he wants. He's free to write whatever he wants within the confines of the prarabdha. He cannot overwrite anything written by the senior clerk. And he can use the pen only when the senior clerk is not using it. But many times he likes what the senior clerk is writing, so he writes along with it. They're both writing together in sync. So they're never actually in conflict, because the fate determines all that is to be experienced. Will determines all that we want. So fate cannot change what we want. I want to live for 100 years. I'm destined to die of cancer next year. Fate can't stop me wanting to live for 100 years. So my will is still free. I may not be free to achieve what I want, but I'm still free to want it. So that is what free will means. Free will doesn't mean that we're free to do whatever we like. We may be free to do, to a certain extent, within the constraints of our destiny, but we can't do anything but would change our destiny. But we're free to want to.
But it's pointless to want it then, isn't it?
That is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. It's pointless to want anything except to turn within. That is why surrender is recommended. Why to want anything?
And another thing is the body, ego and mind. They are the primary disease. The disease affecting the body is secondary. So means it is disease of the disease. The body itself is a disease. So when you surrender, give up all thoughts of destiny and what is going to happen. It means that you are actually not surrendered. If you surrender, just leave everything. And when you leave everything, things will happen. Nothing stops. It doesn't stop an ambulance from coming to your home and picking you up. Everything will happen. But the thing is, you are handing over the luggage to the God. For example, a guy was traveling on the train, and while traveling on the train, he put the luggage on his head. He said, I want to help the train carry the luggage, because the train is pulling the engine, the coaches and all that. So I want to help the train. So he put the luggage on his head. So does it help him? So the ticket examiner comes and asks him, why are you putting the luggage on your head? He says, I want to help the train. He said, whether you put it by the side or put it on your head, it is only the train that is pulling it. So when you face problems, when you surrender, just surrender.
One thing we have to understand, when whatever Bhagavan teaches us, he teaches us for a purpose. So when Bhagavan has said, what is destined to happen is going to happen, and we cannot change it, we cannot add to it an iota, we cannot subtract from it an iota. He said that for a reason. He said that so that we shouldn't worry about these external things. We shouldn't allow our mind to go outward. As he says, we shouldn't want anything. It's pointless wanting anything. So it's in order to help us surrender, but Bhagavan said everything is according to prarabdha. And I mean, everything is according to prarabdha. Bhagavan is not saying it, but I mean, the reason he emphasized that so much is not just, people misinterpret it, as I say. People think, because Bhagavan has said everything is predestined, therefore we have no free will. When he says everything is predestined, everything that we are to experience is predestined. Therefore, we don't have to worry about it. Wanting anything, or either wanting to achieve something or wanting to avoid something, all is futile, because whatever is to be will be. We cannot change it. But the freedom we have is we are free either to want to change it, or we are equally free to surrender, to accept whatever is happening is happening by the sweet will of my dear Lord Bhagavan. If that is our attitude, life is so much easier, so much more pleasant. We don't have to worry about anything. Let cancer come, let any worse disease come. Even some cancers are very, very painful, or there are other types of disease which are very painful. If it is our destiny to undergo that pain, it's going to happen. Bhagavan had the most painful type of cancer. It was cancer growing on a nerve. That's sarcoma. So there's no more painful cancer, probably no more painful disease than that. When people ask, Bhagavan was very calm about it. When people asked him, Bhagavan, isn't there pain? He said, yes, there's pain. It's like if you crush 100 chilies and rub it on the wound. It's like that. But it's not apart from me. So what Bhagavan taught us in words about surrender, he also taught us through his action, through his practice. So Bhagavan is beyond all these things. None of these things affect him at all. But by his life, he has shown us how we should live, with how much indifference we should live. That indifference is vairagya. And without that vairagya, we cannot go within. So the self-surrender and self-investigation, they're actually one and the same thing. They're the two sides of the same piece of paper. Without surrendering, we can't turn within. And without turning within, we can surrender to a certain extent by just cultivating an attitude of acceptance. But ultimately, by cultivating that attitude of acceptance, we are giving up my desires, my attachments. But we can only do so to a certain extent, because so long as I is there, the desires and attachments will be there, at least to a limited extent. If we want to get rid of all desires, all attachments, all fears, get rid of the whole will, there's only one way: get rid of the root of it, which is the ego. And the only way to get rid of the ego is to turn within. So we can partially, Bhagavan, sometimes people said to Bhagavan, "Oh Bhagavan, I'm not able to surrender." Bhagavan said, complete surrender may not be possible now, but everyone can surrender at least partially. So the partial surrender is necessary in order to purify the mind. When we reach a certain point, the surrender can be made complete only by this self-investigation.
But is that also predestined? In other words,
No, very definitely not. Because what is predestined, our destiny, our fate, prarabdha, is the fruit of actions, isn't it?
well, I'm not sure.
Yes, that is what it is. It is action. It is the fruit of past actions which are selected for us to experience in this lifetime. So liberation or self-knowledge can never be the fruit of an action. Self-investigation is not actually an action. It is a cessation of action. That is, when we turn our attention outwards, our mind is going outwards. The outward going movement of our mind, that is action. When we turn the mind within and it subsides, that is a cessation of action. So that is why Bhagavan has said, karma cannot give liberation. Shankara has also said, by any crores of karmas, you cannot achieve it. Only by vichara.
Is there a difference between action and karma?
No.
Is that the same?
Karma means the actions we do by mind, speech and body.
So is it our prarabdha also that some people are searching to know the I am?
No,
We are here and
no.
some people are not?
That prarabdha is concerned only with what you experience. Whether you're searching or not is dependent on your will.
Okay, so
Do you have that love to know the truth or not? So that is completely independent.
it's not my prarabdha that in this life I'm trying to turn spiritual.
No.
Okay.
But what about, for example, Guru say that this disciple came to me because we knew each other in a past life?
That is the destiny is tailor-made for each one of us. At our present stage of development, we are given a destiny which will be most favorable to our spiritual development. So the fact that we've come to know about Bhagavan, that is our destiny. But what use we make of it? Are we going to try and follow what Bhagavan has said or not? Coming to Guru is maybe according to destiny, but whether the use we make of that, that is that's our freedom. That's up to our will. Yes?
Ramana Maharshi got enlightened. Was it destined or he did something?
No, it wasn't destiny. But Because if it was destiny, that would mean it was the fruit of past action. That would mean action has led to liberation. But Bhagavan said very clearly in the second verse of Upadeshundya, Vidu tarile undipara. Action cannot give liberation. And in the Sanskrit version he says, Gati nirodhakam, it obstructs liberation. So action is the very opposite of liberation. So action can never give liberation. So liberation has nothing to do with destiny. But Bhagavan was able, just that fear of death was sufficient to turn Bhagavan within, and immediately his ego dissolved in its source. That is not a result of the fruit of actions. That is the seeds because a fruit has two parts. If you have an apple, you've got the part you eat and you've got the seeds. You can eat the apple, but the seeds remain, and they will make more apples. But, so vasanas are seeds. Vasanas are the elements of our will. So those seeds can either be seeds to make us engage in more actions, or they can be satvasana, is the liking to just be. That is what we cultivate by practicing self-surrender and self-investigation. So because of what the self-surrender and self-investigation that boy Venkataraman had been practicing in previous lives, and because he had already reached so advanced in that, in this life, that resumed and he was able to achieve very easily. When Bhagavan was asked about it, in Tamil Bhagavan said, Edo vittukarai tottakarai. It's almost impossible to translate vittukarai tottakarai into English, but what it more or less means is a work which was left incomplete previously was completed. So he had already done all the surrender and vichara that was necessary, but it wasn't quite completed. That is our destiny, because it was Venkataraman was to be born and to die at the age of 16, and that body which had previously been Venkataraman, when Venkataraman had died, the ego said, I am Venkataraman, was dead. What remained, shining through that body, is our own real nature. That is our Guru. That is, Guru took that form for our benefit. That is our good. That is, we can say it's destiny. But what decides our destiny is grace. So actually, it is the manifestation of grace in our life, appeared in the form of Bhagavan. Why? Because our minds are always going outwards. So it's necessary for him to appear outside to say, turn within.
Can I ask you another question? There's in the last page, first page, in the last sentence is, I alone is the first thought, the mind. It alone is ego, from where ego arises, etc., etc. How do you relate the ego and the action? Is there any connection between the two? And or is it the same side of the two sides of the same coin?
No, the ego is the doer of action. The ego is the one who does action. Actually, actions are done by body, speech, and mind. But because the ego feels, I am this body, I am this mind, the ego, when you think a thought, I think. When what are you doing now? I'm sitting, I'm asking a question. So all these actions are actions done by ego. The ego is that which does all the actions.
Is the action called, this ego got the positive side and also the negative side?
In what sense?
Well, ego, human action depends upon the, ego is dictated by action.
No, action is dictated by ego. Well, the ego is the doer.
the other way around.
You're saying the dog is, the tail is wagging the dog.
Well, how is the connection between the two?
The ego is the doer.
Pardon?
The ego is the doer. And the ego is also the one who experiences the fruit of action. So the ego is both the doer and the experiencer. The doer of the action, of the agamya, because it has its will, and the experiencer of the fruit, the prarabdha. About positive or negative side, there's nothing very positive about ego, because the ego is nothing but a wrong awareness of ourself. Our real nature is infinite self-awareness. The ego is a wrong self-awareness. Instead of being aware of ourselves as just I am I, we're aware of ourselves, I am this body, I am Michael, I am this person. I was born 60 odd years before, and 20, 30, 40, who knows how many years, or maybe next year I'm dead. So who is that I? The I that identifies itself with the body. It's a wrong awareness of what I actually am. So the ego is a false self-awareness, an erroneous awareness of ourself. So there's nothing positive about it.
Well, you see, because of the ego, the person, an individual is doing the bad karma, a bad action.
Yes.
That is the negative side.
Yes.
If you are doing good action, that's a positive side. That's what
from a relative perspective, yes. But from a higher perspective, why to do any action at all? Why to rise as an ego and be... Your real nature is not doing or experiencing. Your real nature is just being. Pure awareness is your nature, not being aware of this or that.
So, Michael, are we captives to destiny?
No.
We're not captives to destiny. Should we?
The destiny is it's going to happen anyway. What is really binding us is not our destiny, it's our will is binding us. It's our will which is keeping...
What's the point? What's the point of us? What's the point of being here?
Because the same will which is now binding you, that will can also set you free. So long as we direct our will outwardly towards other things, in other words, so long as our will is in the form of Vishaya vasanas, the liking to experience things other than ourselves, that binds us. But we can use our will to cultivate the love to know ourselves. That love to know ourselves is also our will, but it's our will going in the opposite direction. And by going in the opposite direction, the same will that now binds us can set us free. It's a matter of what we want. So long as we want to experience phenomena, we are bound. When we want to experience only ourselves, we are free.
So who wants to experience ourselves? Is it
ego?
Ego. So
everything is only ego.
So the will to look inside of yourself,
yes,
to set you free, is also driven by the ego.
It's also driven by the ego.
In that sense, the ego that I have,
yes,
is, and if my desire is strong enough to look inside of me to set me
yes,
free,
yes,
my ego is also driving.
Yes, yes, but all our desires, all our will is a distortion of our real nature. Our real nature is infinite love, not love for this or that. Because we have limited ourselves, we see ourselves as all this world, and so because we are dissatisfied, because we are separated from the infinite happiness that we actually are, seemingly separated, we are dissatisfied, so we get desires for so many things. We think if I have this, I'll be happy, if I have that, I'll be happy. So it is all our desires are a distortion of pure self-love, which is our real nature. That pure self-love, the infinite love we actually are, is what manifests as grace. And what is slowly, by appearing in the form of Bhagavan and telling us from outside, go within. By giving us certain experiences which make us understand that trying to achieve anything in this world, we can't achieve satisfaction, we can't achieve real happiness from anything in this world. So all this, that is discrimination, that's viveka. The viveka is because of the grace shining in our heart, giving clarity to our intellect. And that is why we try to turn within. By trying to turn within, we are strengthening the vasanas to go within and weakening the vasanas to go outside. By weakening those, the freedom from desire to go outside is called vairagya. The liking to go within is called bhakti. Bhakti and vairagya, they're two sides of the same coin. So by following Bhagavan's path, we are cultivating that bhakti and vairagya. We are cultivating freedom from desire for other things by weakening our vishaya vasanas and strengthening our love to go within. In other words, we're turning away from pravritti, going outwards, back to nivritti, going within.
And is grace also prarabdha? To have grace is also...
Grace has given us our prarabdha in order to make us turn within.
So does everybody have that grace?
Grace is your real nature. Grace is the love that you have for yourself. Because you are the infinite whole, grace is the infinite power. But when you limit yourself, then my love is only for me. I want this, I want that. And it becomes selfishness. Selfishness is a distortion of grace. This is the point we all have to reach. Enough, enough. Once someone asked Bhagavan, when we hear all your teachings, why is it our mind is going outward? Bhagavan said, because you haven't had enough yet.